Morning,
Hey,
RJ.
Ron.
How we doing this morning?
Good. It's Friday for us today,
I
at
know,
least it
right?
is.
You
That's
gotta
a
love
good day.
Fridays. Fridays are great. Well, what are we
Yeah.
talking about today?
Well, today we're going to dive into a new series, which is our AI 101 series. And it's going to talk about really like four waves of AI. And I think it's really important as AI becomes, more and more ingrained in certainly our work, our daily lives, but it's such a loose term, right? Like, what is
Yeah.
it? I think people use it generically, and it leads to confusion. So, today we're going to dive in and actually go back and give a little bit of the history of sort of how did we get here and really do some clarifications because I see it in talking to clients. I hear it from colleagues that even in like boardrooms there's this term about, well, we need to be using AI, and it's
Yeah.
like, well, what does that really mean, right? It's there's a lot of nuance to that. So we're gonna sort of dig into this a little bit, and then we're gonna sort of identify the different sort of ways to use it and how to use it, and what is the sort of more specific definitions and thereby the applications of how to do it to get the best outcome. So it should be quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, and from a technical perspective, I mean, we have four different waves, and these waves represent more than just better software, right? They represent a fundamental shift in how we actually handle the data in the infrastructure. So if you, for example, try to run a 2026 AI agent on a 2010 data silo, you're just setting money on fire, right? So we're going to talk about these waves. And if you take nothing from today's webinar, we hope that you learn that AI is not AI. AI is four different models of AI. And if you know which one you need, then you can apply the appropriate AI model to the appropriate data source and the appropriate use case. So
Yeah.
kick us off and talk about the first wave.
And one thing to add on to that, and one thing that we're seeing, Ron, is like, you know, making sure when you say using the right version of AI or the right model, right application, that also is going to correlate into, sort of the commercial side of it. Because now that everything's being tokenized, you don't want to go out, and use the most complicated,
Right.
complex, sort of resource heavy AI piece for a simple task, right?
Right.
You're not going to work out commercially. But going back into the sort of the history, I mean, people think like, oh, AI, it just came up out of nowhere. That
Yeah.
is not true, right?
Yeah.
AI has been around since the 50s, right? I mean, going back all the way in the 50s, and like, what the heck was it in the 50s? Yeah, back, that was the sort of the beginning of this artificial intelligence, which at that point was called machine learning. It still started in the 50s. It's basically, taking algorithms and getting them to learn from structured data. Think like maybe like a spreadsheet, something that's organized. So it's easier to run an algorithm and use that. And you can set it up and you can do it so it's not being explicitly programmed. You're setting up once and it's running. Really sort of like almost like an if then to find things. And think like simplistically, probably some of the earliest applications, just think of like a spam filter. If this looks like that, then move it over there, right?
Right.
Or the very, very, when you start thinking more like in, maybe like internet e-commerce stuff, and this isn't in the 50s clearly, but as it evolved, it got into things like just a recommendation. If this person looked at that, show them this, right? Like,
Right.
so, but it was looking at patterns and identifying things once you set it up on its own. And that goes, like I say, all the way back, started in the 50s, right?
Yeah.
So, it's really, that was the genesis piece of it.
Right. So wave one then was machine learning. And wave one to wave two was a slight adjustment. And they switched from machine learning to what they call deep learning. This really exploded in 2012 with AlexNet, right? And basically, the definition of this is now it's like a subset of machine learning, but using neural networks inspired by human brain, right? So the evolution before was if email pattern looks like this, or if email comes in from RJ, move to my best friend folder, right? And we set that up, and that was what we did. Now, what deep learning says is we have a human that goes in and says, I want you to look for emails where there are certain patterns, and I want you to learn which of the senders are my best friends, right? So for example, I want you to go look for a tail. Here's 10 million photos. And so the AI now goes through and learns what a tail is, rather than us putting an algorithm that says a tail is this only, run your email filter and do that. Now we're going through teaching it how to learn what that is. And that's called deep learning. And that was really out in 2012. So that's the first two waves of what we've really been doing with AI for literally the last 75 years.
Yeah, and this is really about like just to, like decision support. How do you, use it in a way to support decisions? Like, if you're looking at data from like, for in this example, it could be like, banking data or your customer data. Okay, who's likely to churn? What actions or inactions is someone taking that means that they're at risk as a client for that, or for us,
right.
Or is, another critical one is like, okay, does this transaction look like it could be fraudulent, right? So, I mean, for example, Danske Bank used, deep learning application to reduce false positive fraud alerts by 60%. So that saved tons of time and money. They, saved millions and millions, and it actually, kept their customers happy because they weren't being asked about, hey, is this a fraudulent transaction? When we could identify that it was a false positive, no, it's probably okay. So that's an example.
Yeah, I remember back in the day when that was an issue, because I used to get emails almost every other day asking if it was a fraudulent transaction. And some of my transactions where I was trying to charge my card got denied because they thought it was fraud. And then I had to call the bank and they're like, oh, we sent you an email. I'm like, I'm at the store buying something. But then it just kind of went away. So I guess they figured it out, right? But I remember that back 20, 25 years ago, that was a big deal. And that kept happening all the time. The only way this works, I mean, obviously, is structured data, right? You can't turn around and if I wanted to say, go figure out what a tail is, if I give it, 10 million pictures and they're all PNGs and JPEGs, that's easy. But if I handed it web feeds and podcasts and YouTube videos and pictures and white papers, and none of it's structured data, and I don't tell it anything about it, it says, now go figure it out, it's going to have a real major problem, right? And so the key to making this all work is, one, having unified data. And so that's one of the things right now on all the AI projects we're working on is we have to integrate everything, right? So either in one of two ways, we're integrating, if all the data is in their CRM and their ERP, then we're integrating those so the AI can have access to that data. Or two, we're having to migrate all the data, do a RAG, and pull it into a standalone data lake. And then we can point the AI at the data lake once we've used our governance rules and pulled in the data accordingly and adjusted the data and normalized and turned it into structured data, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's where we sort of now are, moving to the next phase in this next evolution, which I think is where a lot of people really sort of had the aha moment about, AI. And that's just recently, right? That's like the generative AI explosion, that occurred, it really sort of like, had the hockey stick take off in like, 2022 to 2024. Right. Interestingly, that started a bit earlier than that. It goes back to about 2017, when Google had their, sort of transformer architecture. But then when you were able to take applications like, ChatGPT that really was sort of broadly adopted beginning in 2022. That's when people are like, oh my gosh, it can do what? And really for that, it's not AI that just, doesn't just categorize data, it creates it, you ask it a question, tell me how to do this, what do you do about that? It's, it creates text. It could create, even some like software code. It could create images. I mean, obviously not all those images are super accurate. Somebody's got 6 fingers or 3 arms or whatever. I mean, that's getting way better right now, by the way.
Sure.
But, it's really like, it's a prediction sort of engine in a way, like based on this, it predicts this next thing, right? The most likely prediction, that sort of comes out of the sequence. So if this, then most likely that. And, that doesn't always lead to the outcome you want, but it does it on its own. And it's sort of, automagic in some ways. And it's really been transformative in, sort of the way that AI has taken hold. It's really like sort of like almost like the conversational era, right? Like you're having a conversation with it. Like, there's, my wife, for example, uses the voice, uses ChatGPT voice to, hey, tell me about this or whatever. And it's like you're asking a question and it talks back and it gives all this information because it has access to, an infinite amount of data that's out there. And so, and if you think about even like business applications and candidly, I just had this experience within the last couple of weeks when I was thinking about taking a weekend getaway. And I was like, okay, well, I'm in Southern California. What if I want to go to Santa Barbara? Well, Amtrak runs right up and down. I don't have to deal with traffic. I went there. Amtrak has their Julie, and that's their first, sort of interaction with a customer or whatever. And it goes in, and it's actually quite helpful. It's real time. It happens now, and it's Julie takes 20 million sort of if online or call like 20 million interactions a year and handles like 25% of all of Amtrak's queries. And it's got like a 800% return on investment. So it's removing bottlenecks and wait times. And so in those sort of things, it's really super beneficial. So we're seeing that both personally in how you're interacting, but also the way that generative AI is coming up with answers and providing answers and generating things. And that's really where sort of the AI explosion sort of occurred.
Yeah. The other explosion that's occurred, and I think you and I have probably had 40 conversations about this, is the negative side of it, which is the hallucination and the lying, right? Generative AI has, it's almost, you said about the picture with the 3 arms, right? I remember seeing a bunch of pictures. I'm like, how come that person has 3 arms in that picture, right? And that's the hallucination part. Again, it's stochastic or random in nature. And so it's saying, what is the most probabilistic outcome based on the information I have? And then it generates and puts together content, pictures, whatever it is. So the biggest risk in that is the hallucination, we call it. And the hallucination is producing outcomes that are not correct. And so the way we address this, and a lot of people ask me this all the time, what is the best way to do that? And for me, I always have to go back and remind them of a Google stat that I read a while ago that says more than 90%. I've seen 2 different stats. One says 90%, one says 95% of all data collected over the last 50 years is dark data. What is dark data? Well, you think about all the data, and I've used this example that Siri has listened in on and captured, but how much of that data does AT&T use to market to me or use for me, right? Very little. The rest of it, the 95% of the data is the dark data, right? So we've gathered it, we've stored it. And now, unfortunately, what clients have done is they go, oh, we need to go get AI, but we can't handle all this data. So they take this closet that has all this dark data in it and the good data. They put AI, they open the door and say, here, Mr. AI, no conscience, no moral compass, photographic memory, go ingest all this data, and it turns it into AI Wikipedia and it starts sharing things that they didn't realize they were going to share. So how do we prevent that? Well, the first thing I tell people, you're not going to spend $500,000 in 6 months doing a data normalization, cleanse, mitigation exercise, because that's what's really needed to do it right. If you wanted to use every bit of data, which 99.9% of the time you don't need, start small, pick a project, figure out the data you have to have, then use your governance rules to tokenize and normalize and cleanse that data, pull it into a clean data lake. And then with data that we know is secure, that we know is clean, that we know is normalized, point AI to that data. And that's what we call the data lakes. And now it can't hallucinate because you can say, I want you to restrict your answers to the data that's been supplied to you. And it has to answer within those confines. So we call that RAG. We ingest the data into a clean data lake. We use governance rules to ensure that we're ingesting clean data. And then as we find that we ask it questions and it doesn't have answers because it's missing pieces of data, then we go back and bring in more data. It's easy after the fact to add more and more data in as it's needed than it is to put too much in and then deal with the exacerbation of sharing secrets it wasn't supposed to share, right?
Yeah, and or there's all the different sort of rules and adjustments that you go in and make corrections and evolve sort of your prompting and all that sort of stuff to make sure that you're decreasing that level of hallucinations on top of having really solid and sort of a confined amount of data.
Right. So what's the next wave? The final wave, wave
Well,
4.
This is where we're at, right? Agentic.
Yeah.
This is the latest and greatest. It's what we're doing. It's shifting from sort of AI is like a chatbot to really actually doing things, right? And I know that agentic AI sort of from a definition perspective is it has sort of reasoning and planning and it actually executes a task. It doesn't just like, for example, it doesn't just tell you, hey, guess what? Your flight's canceled. It says, okay, your flight's canceled. And here's, the next options we saw. And based on the way that you've traveled in the past, I can go ahead and book this one for you and put all the notifications on your calendar and let you know. And you could say, yep, good, do it. Right. So it's not just the notification piece. It's actually, taking an action, right? And that's where we're at now and really where we're rolling out. But to your point, we talked earlier, right? Agentic, generative, machine learning, deep learning. It's like, it doesn't mean that just because we're at the agentic commerce piece, all the other things go away, right? That's just this application of it. So, I think that's where we're seeing, and I know you're seeing as well, on the Clarity side. Okay, let's use AI to actually do things. Let's automate stuff and it will understand and it can adapt and execute these tasks.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about the execution, right? Kind of like you said. So we're moving from kind of like your flight, we're moving from AI that assists to AI that actually does the work, right? I think one of the stats that I read was that Gartner reports that 40% of enterprise applications now have an embedded task-specific agent, which was up from just 5% 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, we have a project we're kicking off right now, and we were talking to this prospect a year ago, and they're like, "Well, gosh, can't we just like use AI to do all this stuff?" And it was an interesting concept right then. I'm like, "Well, I don't really know." But here we are today, and guess what? A piece of this project, we're going to use, a multi-agent workflow to go identify, do something, then confirm that it was done properly, and then move this and then complete the task, right? So even in that 1 year, now it's actually, now we can do those things and do them, in a sort of controlled way, but it actually can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. The interesting thing about agents nowadays is because they're kind of solidarity, right? These agents can now work autonomously and on their own. And so the way we interact with these different agents is through these APIs. And those APIs are the hands when we can shake hands with them and work in and out of them. But when you're putting these agents together and when you're coding these agents, you have to think about all the governance rules. The example you gave a minute ago about instead of just canceling Ron's flight, it canceled it, found another flight, booked it. Well, what if the only flight was available was on United Emirates Airways and it was a $12,000 business class seat, but all I had was an economy seat that was, $500, and the only one available to rebook is a $12,000 seat. Do we do that because they were the ones that made the choice to bump me because they overbooked a flight? Are they going to eat that cost? There have to be governance rules in there because remember, without a conscience and without a moral compass, AI can make decisions that you may not agree with. So the big thing about these agents is the term that I hear us use all the time is guardrails. We have to be very good about defining what our guardrails is. Where can we drive? If we're going to have all these Waymo and all these autonomous cars driving all over the place, when things screw up, do we let them drive to Vegas or do they bump into the side and we have a small ding, but then they're held within their lane and they stay within the confines of the risk analysis that we've put on those guardrails, right?
Yeah, no, that's critical, right? So I think, for sort of thinking through what we've covered today, some of these key components are going back to look, AI isn't just one thing, it's many things. Yeah. And, like I have a colleague of mine who's working for a large firm, and the board of directors said, well, we've got to start using AI. And well, what does that mean? Nobody knows what that means. So each department's like doing their own thing. And am I doing, deep learning? Am I doing a generative? Am I doing agentic? Like there's different sort of aspects of AI, and understanding that, whether it's, sort of old school machine learning or deep learning, like we talked about, where it's actually can identify things, or is it generative AI, or is it actually agentic AI? Knowing that and understanding that in your communication, especially in a business setting, is going to lead to much better outcomes. And it's, everyone's going to know they're talking about the right thing. And it's also going to enable the most efficient application of AI, because you're not using some, heavyweight thing to do a simple task.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing is I hear everybody talking about AI as their competitive advantage, and they have to do AI, and they think that they have to do AI because their competitors are doing AI. But what they don't appreciate is it's not the AI model, right? Everybody is going to be using AI. Let's be clear. Everybody's going to be using AI, right? Your competitive advantage is your data.
Yeah.
Right. All the data that you've gathered for the last 5, 10, 50 years, 150 years you've been in business. That's your competitive advantage. What AI does is AI now allows you to analyze the data, make decisions from the data. AI is finally delivering the promise of BI that we've been trying to get for the last 50 years, right? I mean, it was 25 years ago, we have to have BI, but we didn't have the data. So then for the last 25 years, we've been gathering data. Then 10, 15 years ago, it was, well, now we have all this data. Now we have a big data problem. So then we had to do Hadoop and architectural models that could handle big data, but we still couldn't analyze all the data, right? We could report on it within the confines of our own brain and what we could think we could analyze, but we never had something that could go back through 150 years of data, look for patterns, learn it, find out, build the trends, and show everything like AI can. So for me, one of the biggest things, your competitive advantage, is using AI to bring your data together and do that analysis that you've never been able to do before. That's your competitive advantage. It's in the data.
Well, and the other thing about that is your data is unique to your company, right? Your competitors don't have your data. They don't have your, customer interactions. They don't have your sales data. They don't have any of that stuff. So that, to your point, that's leveraging that is your key, because no one else can do so.
Yeah.
To your point, like the promise of AI, well, now it's like, okay, well, when we think about what we still do and what we used to do, which is sort of digital transformation, and now, a piece of that is AI. And, so going from tools that sort of help you decide to actually tools that are executing a task, right? Doing the thing, right? That's now the next step of digital transformation that are part of our everyday conversations and more part of our projects. And so that's, to your point, I think that is delivering the value that everyone sort of was looking for, and will take us to where we're, way more productive.
Yeah. So in closing, this is kind of a quick summary. Go back and find something small, pick a job, find out what you need. Then you need to analyze which of the 4 models. If it's a risk or a fraud, then that's great for 1 or 2, right? Machine learning, deep learning works really great for risk or fraud. If it's for content or communication, we know that that's really good for generative AI. ChatGPT, we've been using it for years that way, right? And the 4th, the agentic, is plugging agents in to do complex things and complex workflows, and being part of a bigger process where the AI agent is only one specific function within that. I like to think about agents like a bank. I walk into the most expensive bank in Manhattan, and the first person I see is the Walmart greeter with a gun, right? He's making sure I'm not a robber. And then he looks over and says, "Hey, Mr. Halverson, what are you here for today?" Based on my response, "Oh, I'm here to make a deposit." He sends me to the teller agent. Or, "I'm here to put my passport back in my safe deposit box." He sends me to some agent that has access to the vault. Or, "I'm here to refinance my house." He sends me to a loan agent, right? There are specialized agents that are secure only within their own area, that have very focused intent and function. That's where agents play really, really well. And the explosion that's happening right now in 2026 is about agents. So if you really understand agents, that's great. But there's still a lot of us that are out writing SEO, AEO, and GEO content that really need to be using generative AI. And so we're not going to use agents for that, or we may not use agents for that. We may use both. I may use an agent to go out and do some research on a specific topic and bring some data back, and then use my generative AI to take that research and help me generate some content. So if you understand the 4 waves and the differences in what they can solve, it makes it really easier for you to apply the correct wave, the correct model, and make those decisions. It makes it a lot easier. And if you can't figure it out because it's a lot to learn, then please leave a comment, reach out to a partner like RJ or I. We're absolutely happy to have a sales-free consultation to walk you through some of this stuff, talk through some of your ideas, and figure out which model is right for you. You want to say goodbye for us, RJ?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that, it's such a fast moving sort of just evolution of technology. It's impossible to keep up on. So find a partner like Ron or myself. We're in this all day, every day. We're keeping up as best we can, and we can help be sort of like that, Sherpa that can help you climb this AI mountain and figure out not only sort of what type of, application, but also you get into what model that all of these, AI platforms have multiple models to choose from. So even trying to distinguish, well, should I be using, OpenAI or Anthropic or Google or whatever? Inside of that, there's many, many, many models, and there's actually even open source models. So understanding which models to use, it can get deep quick. So find a trusted partner like Ron at Clarity or myself at Friends of Commerce and Friends of AI, and we're happy to help and share any ideas, share what we're seeing in our project. But the main thing is that it's taking a measured approach, starting out and getting something built. Do it sort of from a broad perspective as a rollout, but start in increments, and we can help you do that, and we'd be happy to have those conversations.
Well, thanks again for joining us. Don't forget to leave a comment below, like the video. Bye for now.